And again, thanks to everybody. I really appreciate the opportunity to be speaking with you today, and I appreciate everybody patching in. So, um, these are going to be the typical slides. They've obviously going to be updated. And so these are just our, the USGS Planetary Geologic Map Coordinator comments and remarks. And I always like to point out that when I am presenting, I'm presenting on behalf of a group. And so I am just the person that is speaking about things. I move money around and assign a lot of projects, but a lot of the bulk work that's being done is not being done by me, but it's being done by an excellent group of people. And there's 3 people that are highlighted on this list now, and that's Sarah Black, Holly Boobin, and Anderson Moyers. And these folks have just come on recently. And so if you can advance to the next slide. So I feel like right now we are operational. So I'm assuming that everybody's laughing out loud. That's one of the things that we don't have. We can't see all of the interactions with everybody, but I feel like right now that the PGM group is operational, fully operational for the first time in the time that I've been here, which is almost 20 years. And what that means is that, over time, as we have, as a group and a community, try to get people to more appreciate geologic mapping process and product, we've had success. And so the good work that the community is doing, our community is doing to get these products out there is taking hold now. And we do see a bigger increase in the demands on our group. And with that big increased demand, we have had to do some very specific hiring, and with the federal government, that takes a long time. So we do feel like we have become fully operational, and I'm really proud of our group. And so Sarah Black is a Tanaka Greeley Fellow, and we are really happy about having her on. Holly Boobin, who has been working with us for a while, has been hired on as a physical scientist. She was a contractor for a long time and actually started as a space grant intern. Anderson Boyers is a GIS analyst and is working with Trent and with Marc Hunter. And so we are happy to have him on as well. So I think this rounds out our group finally. I'd like to point out too that nobody wants to know, or maybe you want to know, but it's not necessary to know the specifics about how the money is moving around and all the different things that we have. But I want to point out that we have about 9 people that are focusing on planetary geologic mapping and support. And of those 9 people, we're about half, 40% or 50% covered. So we have about 4.5 FTE that is covering people and spread around over 9 people. Our goal is to have about 66% of our funding in our group come from support of the community, and another third come from research. We want to be involved in research. We have to be involved in research in order to be able to provide the services that we provide to the community. It would be nonsensical for us to be 100% support without writing proposals and participating in the proposal process and publishing our own documents, just because we have to be involved. So that is our goal. And ultimately, the goal of our group is to be able to minimize the amount of time that we have maps at the USGS. If you can advance to the next slide. So right now, current map status, we have about 245 USGS maps that have been printed and posted. 46 maps are considered active, and those are, we have about 50 some that are on the docket. Some of those are delinquent maps that have not been advanced recently. So what we consider to be active maps are the ones that are actually being moved along in the process, or actively presenting and actively engaging the USGS and the community. 29 of those active maps are actually in progress. People are actively mapping. We'll hear about some of those today. 1 is in review, 10 are in revision, and we have 6 in production. And that's bolded because that's a really big number for us. We haven't had that many maps in production in a long time. I mean, at least the past 10 or 11 years. So having maps in production is a good thing. It also, when they're in production, it leaves the USGS Astrogeology Science Center and it goes to California. So we kind of lose lock on it, meaning that we can't promote things, we can't move things along. It's just the way it goes. But it's great to have that number in production. Shortly, by the end of the summer, we will have probably another 2. So that'll be 8 in production. And that's just a really large number. It's really good. Of those maps that are there, it's Athabasca, Olympus Mons Caldera, Morava Vallis, a Xanthi Terra or Shalbatana map, Aeolus Dorsa, and a Europa Global map. So really good. Kudos to everybody that is participating in that. Phone's ringing. When is it that a phone is going to ring in the house? Everybody's on cell phone now. So I actually do have a house phone, and it is spam. So 127 maps are in GIS format, and we're converting about 1 per week. Things have slowed down a little bit at the USGS just because of the situation that we're in, but we are trying to get everything done as quickly as possible. So 127 maps in GIS format, and we have a list of demanded maps that we are kind of attending to. Those ones that are being referenced the most often are the ones that we're hitting first. These maps in digital format are available via USGS Astropedia, but Marc Hunter is also working with the USGS to try to turn these maps into data releases. So talking with them, we wanted to post these digital maps on the USGS publication warehouse to allow them to be downloaded with the map itself, with the hard copy scan of the map. And in order to do that, we have to turn them into data releases so they have a unique DOI, and there will be a link on the webpage. So we're going through that process right now. Eventually, all the maps, even past historical maps, will be digitized and posted online with their respective scanned map. So including all the different old Mariner-based Mars maps and the old lunar maps. That's good. We have, as a group, over 5,600 citations. This is an old number now, and I parenthetically say here that we're going through the process of updating this and trying to get a systematic way of showing how many times all of these maps have been referenced, which is going to be important to us whenever we have data calls from NASA. We can say, this is the importance. This is one metric that we can use. It's just the sheer number of times that these maps have been cited. Okay, next slide. Okay, so a couple happy grams that I want to throw out here. I think it's important to be able to point out some things. The mapping process is tedious, especially the review process. There's a lot of back and forth that goes on to it. Is very frustrating for all participants involved, but everybody is really patient and has been really good with this. So I want to give some shout outs here. Devin Burr for the OLS map for an excellent geologic map text. The write-up there was really good and it was appreciated going through and reading that. Sharon Wilson for the Morava Vows. The GIS preparation on these, across the board, the GIS projects are getting to be better and better, and that's really appreciated. In this case, Sharon does an excellent job of preparing these GIS files, and it's very much appreciated. Brian Heenick on a Rembrandt, is a Mercury and a Caprades Mars map for excellent layouts. The layouts that were presented here are making heavy use of GIS, and they are very near to what we'd expect to have something be for publication. Very much appreciated. Dan Berman for his Xanthotera or Shalbatana map. The way we're doing this now is we provide bulk comments to the authors, and their job, just like in the journal article, would be to provide responses back to those specific comments. And I think that Dan did a really good job of explaining exactly what was going on and providing a good summary of the things that we are expecting from a response, and that's nice. And then Aaron Leonard for the Europa map. And this is just a shout out to the sheer strength of will and perseverance that somebody can put into a project that was not originally even their project. This Europa map bounced around over many years from multiple people. And it's not only is it a complicated body, but then the process of getting this thing funded and then passed around was complicated. And I really appreciate Aaron's perseverance and the interactions that we had and the ups and downs that we went through with this map. But that one is in production right now, and I'm really proud of the work that was done there. So kudos to everybody. So next slide. Okay, so NASA selections. I'd like to throw this up there because we're not getting any kind of selection numbers from NASA, but we don't need them because we're tracking them ourselves. So the specification document that we put out in 2019 with NASA that you guys all probably know and love, and that's in quotes, that you have to get a note from the USGS saying that we can support this thing. For multiple reasons, this is good. And one of the reasons is that we can track what is going on, what programs are funding, what maps, scales, that kind of thing. So just in general, our selection rate is 22%, and that's from ROSES 2015 to 2019. ROSES 2020 is actually ongoing right now. This is the breakdown on proposed versus selected and the rate based on the program is listed across the top. So participating scientists, all the different DAPs, PDART is in there, and SSW as well. And so you can kind of look at those numbers. I don't need to read off a table for you. But on average, we have 17 proposed maps per year. That kind of goes up and down. And that we have an average of 4 selected, and that also goes up and down. That's just what an average is. PDART and DAPs are typically the most successful, quote unquote. Those are the programs that are selecting the proposals. Now, you can read into that lots of different things. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're more amenable to the mapping proposals. It's just that that is what's selecting. The dog that you hear barking, this is just one of the things that happened with online, is not my dog, it's a neighbor's dog. So apologies if that's coming across really loud. So the selection rate is comparable to overall programs. And I think that that's a good thing. We don't want it to be higher or lower. What we want is to have our proposals be well prepared and have a fighting chance against every other well prepared proposal. One thing that I've been pointing out in the past is that we have 4 new starts, so 4 new mapping projects, and we have 2 USGS printed typically on average. Now this is different. We have 6 and soon to be 8 maps that are in production. So we have 4 funded and 8 that are going to be printed over the course of the year. That's really good because we can finally start beating down these kind of inventory numbers that we have. 2020 publication will exceed funding. We anticipate 8 for 2020 and 2021 production. So next slide. Okay, protocol updates. We want to get on a 2-year cadence. 2018 was when we put that first protocol out, and it's been really heavily referenced, and that's been good for us and hopefully for the community as well. It kind of sets a template. It doesn't try to be the end all be all, but it certainly is outlining the process that we are expecting as a community for these kinds of maps. So in the protocol, we do have one that's coming out. It'll be out by the end of this year. It will have be published as a USGS open file report. And the point there is to get it to have a referenceable DOI number. But that kind of set us back a few months, as did COVID. So we hope to have it out by this time, but because of everything that's going on, we're pushing it a little bit, and we're anticipating a December, January publication date, but we still will have this 2-year cadence. In there, you will see an updated review process, which Corey will present on here in a little while. I'm really pleased with that, and I think it's a good thing. We have some nomenclature guidance on how to place and use nomenclature. We're including, as was requested by the community, some common mapping pitfalls. We see all these maps come in, so we can see the kinds of things that are consistent issues that are coming up. And so we will identify those as common mapping pitfalls. We more strictly define the sunset date, which is 5 years. And so this is the date that a map has to be. So 5 years from when it was funded, and 5 years to the point where it has to get through compliance, meaning that it's submitted to USGS and accepted for review. That doesn't mean it's published in that time frame, but after that time frame, if it can't get through compliance in 5 years, then USGS support will cease. And this has been run by NASA and has been approved by them as well. So that's the kind of time frame that we're trying to push for. Obviously, if things come up and life things come up, then we will work with people, but we don't want to have things languishing. We want to have things published within 3 or 4 years. That's our goal. The updated web pages, the web pages in the protocol document have been updated. And then we also added into the specification document that progress is being tracked by the USGS. So the progress of your map, we're doing a lot of work on trying to gauge the amount of time that maps are being spent per stage of process. And that is being tracked by us, and that is being reported to, upon request, to NASA program officers. And so that's something that everybody needs to be aware of. You probably do it anyway, but it's something that when you sign your specification document, you are acknowledging that things are being recorded and tracked and could be reported to NASA. We're not trying to be the police. What we're trying to do is just track the numbers across the extent of the program so we can do the best job to provide service to NASA and the mappers. We are also considering including a projected submit date. We know that that will change based on when things are reviewed and when things are funded, but people can, in their proposal, they're saying they're anticipating starting on this one date. And so we will start to include what a projected submit date would be, and so that people can start to scope their proposals as much as possible. And so, again, knowing that that's going to change a little bit, especially as things get funded and GIS is built and that sort of thing. Next slide. Okay, so this is, again, a slide that we've thrown up before. This comes into protocol, but the point here, and we don't have to read this off, is just that if properly scoped, a map can be accomplished on this idealized timeline, which is 3 years. So there has been this kind of perception, and it has been true in part in the past, that geologic maps take forever. And while that has been true, with digital data sets and with all the different review processes and the things that are going on now, this should not be the way it goes. We don't want to have something go for 5, 6, 7, 8 years, which is what it's been in the past. We want to get it as short as possible. And this is just to show that map preparation can take 2.5 years, submit, and if it's tightened up and well put together, the technical review will take 2 months. We actually can turn them around in 2 weeks now, depending on when things come in. Author edits can be 2 months, and then if it's accepted and then pushed on to publications in California, then that's when, as far as NASA is concerned, as far as the author is concerned, the project is done, other than some minor interactions. So this can be done in 3 years. Kind of a flexible schedule might be 4.5 years, and then the maximum schedule will be 6 years, where it's just absolutely the time to get this thing in and get it published. Next slide. Okay, so Mark is not giving a talk today, but he wanted me to throw some information in there about what's new in ArcGIS and just GIS in general. And so this is from Mark and from Anderson. Um, I'll lead this off by saying that if you guys ever have any kind of questions whatsoever about what to do with GIS, then please reach out to these folks individually. And they are here to help. We are all here to help, and we'd like to communicate with people. In fact, we prefer that, just to know that things are actually progressing and moving along. They're expecting to be contacted. They want to be contacted. And so please reach out to them if you have any kind of questions about things. So ArcMap, not 108, but 10.8 and ArcPro 2.5, they will be supporting ArcMap through 2026 or so, that day being Esri. And so they are trying to get everybody to migrate into ArcPro. And so we have been doing that a little bit on our side. I'm aware that some people in the community are doing this as well. This is a reminder that there are Esri hosted web services, including High-Rise Image Mosaic, Caltech CTX Mosaics, and Demus Mosaics. So you can kind of just plug into those through your ArcMap project or ArcPro project and have those download if you have a web server. PGM or Mercator GIS Lab, we still have video tutorials that can be accessed through YouTube. We're updating those as much as we can. Slowed down a little bit because of COVID, but there are also self-paced GIS exercises, some workflow SOPs, and then there's a Python toolbox that can be used to perform a variety of relevant GIS analytical and some editing tasks that are very common to our community, and that's being updated regularly as well. So if you need information on that, then please reach out to these guys. And then finally, there's lots of free Esri training through organizations that have a maintenance license for Esri. So please reach out and check those out. The chances are, if you have a question about something, then somebody else has too. And so it's important to reach out and try to either ping us or just do a basic Google search and get online and do some training, that kind of thing. We're not trying to pawn off responsibility, but if you have questions about like geodatabase management and topologies and that sort of thing, there are training sessions that are out there that are free to use. And so I'd certainly encourage people to do that. And like I said, as always, reach out to Mark and to Anderson and to me and Corey. We're still there as well. But if you have GIS specific questions, then reach out to these things. Next slide. So when I put this on here, this burning hoop, and then I thought about, we're tracking things so closely and we're watching what's going on that it might not quite feel this way. So next slide. It more feels probably like this. So the ISR on, here we are looking at you guys and bearing down over your shoulder about the things. And, we want to do that in an encouraging way, not in a Mount Doom, fiery hell type of way. So please bear in mind that as we go through these things. So as Corey will mention, we have a renovated review process that I think is going to be really beneficial to us. Another thing about the process to remind you guys is that when you resubmit your map, we are thoroughly cross-checking the responses to comments. I mean, thoroughly. So we will go through everything and make sure that what has been said is actually being done. It benefits the author to be able to summarize very explicitly what's going on. We don't want you to write a book about things, but as you see, there are many pages of comments that have been addressed to you, and we need to have full responses coming back. So we want thoughtful responses and serious changes. Any kind of peripheral or non-substantive changes are going to be rejected flat out. We're not copy editing this thing, we're actually going through substantive changes. And we want people to address the spirit of the comment and not just the word of the comment. And that's why we'll always use things like, here and throughout, do these kinds of things. It's very important to consider that when you're putting these things together. I know people want to get them in as fast as possible, but doing it thoroughly is going to more benefit than the speed of getting something back in. All components must match. And so this is something that we see quite a bit, is that one of the complications about geologic maps is that all the different components have to cross-check with each other, and they don't often, and it's really hard to get them to be that way. This is why things are different than with just peer-reviewed journal articles, is that everything has to match. So be sensitive to that. And just a reminder, not try to be a meanie and not trying to be Sauron or anything about it, but we will return to the author for re-examining and resubmit if we need to, because it's just, we want things to progress. And if we have to spend a bunch of time with it and it's not going to progress, and we're just going to send it back and indicate to people what they need to be doing. The next slide. Like I said before, the description mapping is just something that we really see that has a lot of problems often, or inconsistencies is probably the best way to put that. The interpretation must match the observation. So if you have an interpretation that doesn't link whatsoever to the observation, then there's a problem, and that's going to be called out. Those characteristics that are being identified as characteristics for the map unit, they should be objective, and they should also be pervasive in order to be a definition of a map unit. But keep that in mind. We want consistent description of the unit for the definitions, and then the observation has to fall from that description. So you can't say something about like bright toned, hummocky, and then say an interpretation is glacial deposits, because there's no link there whatsoever. So there has to be some kind of link that makes sense for the interpretation. So moving on, let USGS know if your proposal is selected. Also let USGS know if it's not selected. We don't get a report from NASA. We can ping the program managers, but we just don't know when things are coming in. So if you get selected, don't wait around, let us know. We'll offer you some congratulations, slap a high five, and then we can move on and start working on your project just so you can start as soon as possible. If you're not being funded, that's a bummer, and we will console you and say, that's a bummer, and we can work on it with you next time, but let us know just so we can track everything. USGS, the community was asking for a USGS map to be in the NASA Harvard Astrophysical Data System, and that has now happened. And big thanks to Holly Boobin for getting this together. She worked pretty closely with the folks at ADS to get all these maps in there. It is now complete, and that's an excellent service. Things are searchable now, and that's good. The next thing we're working on is working on the geoscience world to get them into GeoRef, because the maps, even though they state that they are, our maps and USGS maps in general are not in GeoRef in a systematic way. So we actually have a meeting with them next Monday, I believe, to try to work out the way we can do that. And if we need to help them by giving them databases, then they're certainly willing to do that. Two last things here is there's no need to reference USGS efforts in your map text. We often see that a lot, that people will say USGS provided these kinds of things, and it just is. And it's just a basic service that we're providing for you guys. So no need to reference us. And then also we need to remove branding from the map text in general. So instead of saying ArcGIS, you can just say GIS. Instead of saying Wacom tablets, you can say digital mapping tablets, that sort of thing. So we want to remove branding to the extent possible. Now, if it's relevant because it does a special thing, then you can include it, but we will start highlighting those things. Next slide. Use templates, components, and folders. Mimic past published maps, that's always helpful. Don't use technical review as copy edit. We expect things to be solid when they come in, otherwise it will be returned. Describe units in a consistent order, and make sure the wording matches across all map components. In this case, we don't want to use a thesaurus and try to use different words for everything. We want to use hummocky across the board, not hummocky, bumpy, ridged, whatever. We want to use the same word across all different components. So this is not a place to try to diversify your terminology. You want to use the same thing. Next slide. I put this up last time. I'm just going to leave it in here just so that people can reference it. But things for proposals, we can have discussions with you, but USGS is not in a place to direct you what to do with your proposal. We won't do that. We'll advise you colleague to colleague, but we cannot direct you what to do. Prepare your boundaries specifications in advance to contacting USGS. We can certainly help you with that, but the onus is on you to figure out the different projections, especially the lat-long boundaries and the size of the map based on the scale. Recall that the map sheet is typically 42 by 56 inches, and you should plan for about 66% of that taking up the maximum as a maximum for what can be occupied for the map itself. Maps that are giant or unwieldy, and we want to be able to preserve a certain amount of space for all the different components. Multiple map sheets are possible, but they're kind of discouraged. Multiple sheets, sometimes, not always, will mean multiple sims, and that means multiple reviews, and that means multiple years, and that means multiple upset people, and we don't want to have that. So one map is enough. And so trying to do two is complicated. It's certainly possible, and in certain situations it's preferred, but seriously consider what needs to be done here. New data doesn't necessarily mean a new map needs to be made. In the map text, you want to discuss previous mapping and why a new map is needed. That also goes for the proposal. And scale should be driven by the goals. So not just try to fit something on the map sheet, but try to figure out what you're trying to answer with the proposal and set your scale that way. Next. That's it. So again, appreciate everybody's efforts. I think we've really come a long way. We've been working on trying to speed things up for the past 8-10 years. And it feels like we're really, when I say we, I mean the community, not the USGS. We're just here to help. And so I think the community has really come a long way in advancing these maps, and we're really getting to a place where we're starting to take off. And I'm proud of the work that the community's done. I'm proud of the maps that are coming in, and I'm looking forward to seeing what we can do over the next 2 or 3 years, because I think we'll really have some significant advancements in the maps that are getting out, and the kinds of maps and the styles of maps and the quality of them. So that's all I have.
All right, thanks, Jim. There are a couple of questions. There's one from Devin, was asking about, sorry, where was that? Sorry, I'm trying to go back up through the chat now without like messing up my computer screen.
Yeah, Devin had 2 questions. Reasons for greater demand for USGS service. And then the other was answered by Corey in terms of when the 5-year clock ends.
Okay, so I can scroll through and see these. So as far as the reasons for the demands, I think that that's probably something that is debatable. I think that there was a lull. People that have been around long enough understood that there's a lull. When we started getting a lot of data from lots of different missions on multiple bodies, there was kind of a lag in the production of USGS maps. And around that time, we had a lot of people retire. And so I think that we're just now ramping up to kind of a reinvigoration of the community, a reappreciation of geologic maps. And that means standardized and non-standardized maps. And so that increased demand that we feel is real. And it is because, in my opinion, that there's just a broader recognition of the value of geologic maps and what they do, and not just standardized maps, but also non-standardized. And so we assist both. We spend a lot of time, getting our maps into like a standard kind of format, but we also help non-standardized mappers as well, and that's a good thing. So that's where I perceive the demand coming from. And then the other question was, when are the 5 years from the sunset date measured?
5 years, yes.
Yeah. And then Corey, I think, answered that one. So 5 years is measured from the dates that the GIS package is delivered to the person. So when we put proposals in, as everybody knows, you kind of guess when something's going to start, but for various reasons, when things are reviewed, when the money comes, all that, then start dates are fluid. And so we pull the trigger on the start date when the GIS project is prepared and then delivered, and we enter into a timetable, and then we go from that.
And Deborah had a question, Jim. Is there still somewhere she can access the list of claimed quadrangle maps?
Yeah, good question. There is, and so there is an interactive kind of web map on the Planetary Geologic mapping web pages. It's not the best, and we're going through trying to figure out the best way to kind of display that, but there is one there, and it does show all the maps that are active and in progress. Now, if you need something above and beyond that, and I'm not sure that this is downloaded, if there's a link to this, but we have a shapefile that shows the boundaries of all of these. And so if people want to have that, then we can certainly provide that or make something like that available to people. So if you can't find it by poking around on the USGS website, then certainly let us know. And we are working to make that a little more accessible. There is a list of maps as well. And so it's not super straightforward, but if you go to the USGS websites and start to poke around on the different bodies, you will see a kind of a graphical representation of them, as well as a list of the maps. And those are the ones that are active and in progress.
Yeah, Mark Hunter is going to probably put a link into chat, but his meeting crashed.
Yeah, and like I said, so Deborah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, I mean, people look for this a lot, and sometimes I have to search for it as well. And so we're working on, now that we have this kind of full boat of people, we are trying to target those exact kind of things. It's like, man, this should be easier to find. And so we are working on it. If you can't find it for this or anything else, then feel free to reach out. We expect people to reach out to us. So we'd like people to be able to find it on their own, but if they can't, then reach out and we will get something to you for this or any other thing.